Today, we focus on Nigeria's budget crisis, looking at the persistent financing gaps and the challenges in implementation that continue to affect critical sectors and public services. Recent reports by organizations such as Budget and other fiscal watchdogs have highlighted that a significant portion of the annual budget remains unspent or underutilized, with delays and inefficiencies preventing funds from reaching the intended projects and communities. So to help us unpack these issues and understand the implications for government policy, economic growth and citizens' welfare, we're joined via Zoom by Dr. Aliyu Ilias, an economist and financial commentator. Dr. Ilias will examine the root causes of these budget shortfalls, analyze the performance of the budget in recent years, and discuss how better planning, transparency, and fiscal discipline could bridge the financing gaps and improve implementation. Stay with us as we explore why billions of naira in the budget are often left on paper and what can be done to ensure that public resources translate into real development and services for Nigerians. Welcome, Dr. Aliyu Ilias, and welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hauwa, go ahead. Yeah.
Dr. Ilias, thank you for joining us again. Looking at Nigeria's budget, we've seen that there are always discrepancies when it comes to having that budget implementation as well as its tally as well. Now, looking at Nigeria's 2026 budget projects total revenue of about 50.7 trillion naira against expenditure of 54.43 trillion naira, leaving a deficit of about 20.1 trillion naira, now over 1/3 of the spending. With such huge deficit, how realistic is this budget, in your opinion, as an expert?
Right. Please, do you mean 2025 budget or 2026 budget? Right. So talking about Nigerian budget, we have seen a lot of fiscal indiscipline in the Nigerian budget, and it has actually affected a lot of things negatively. Let's even look at 2025 because it's an ongoing budget. If you look at the budget, if you look at the component of the recurrent expenditure, component of budget, debt servicing, if you also look at the component of capital expenditure, you will agree with me that capital expenditure has not been appropriately utilized, especially with the fact that the news we are getting now is that there's going to be a rollover of about 70% of capital expenditure to 2026. That's a serious problem, and that simply means Nigerian citizens are going to suffer, because the only thing that the generality of Nigerian citizens benefit from is the capital component of the budget. That actually cater for social infrastructure, cater for education, cater for healthcare, cater for things that benefit people. But if you look at the recurrent, it's just people that work for government, political office holder. And if you look at debt servicing also, it's also eroding the budget. So a lot of issues that's happened. And if I may even say the major problem is that the physical indiscipline of this administration is a serious problem. And it has actually undermined the effort of the last administration that practiced budget of January to December. Because if budget is not January to December, it brings a lot of things. If you look at the debate we are having now, is that about two budgets is concurrently going on, which is a serious problem. It has problem to the extent that it exposes Nigeria budget to corruption. You could also see the issue of low capital payment to contractors. That's also a problem. So if you look at the holistic budget that President Buhari have tried to correct, we've seen that this government have actually went back to the whole days where we don't even know how to monitor the budget. So it's a problem that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu must be intentional. And I will not blame President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I would like to blame the National Assembly, because the National Assembly have the right to oversight, right to pass the budget. As of today, I don't think there is much thing on 2026 budget.
I know, Dr. Ilias, we've seen a lot of deficit, and Nigeria consistently underperforms on revenue targets, especially. Now, why does the government keep adopting optimistic revenue projections despite historical shortfalls? You'd think that when year after year, you'd learn from previous budget mistakes. So why do you think it's something that has become continuous? And I know we would see it roll over again.
Right. I think it is strategic to have deficit budgets. It's not a bad thing at all. When you have the deficit budget, simply means you are giving room to actually borrow more. It's not bad to borrow, like what we have been seeing in this government. Even though the borrowing to me is not it's not in a sustainable manner, but it's not bad to have a deficit budget. And in budget, there's also a projection. You project oil price globally. You project the revenue you are going to get. You project even the naira to dollar value. It's a proposed and projected one. But the fact is that you must get your facts right. You must propose right. So that you can actually plan. But the major thing is that if you look at our budget, over 80% of our revenue is going to debt servicing. So that means it's a problem. So sometimes you could also project for oil price to actually go up, which sometimes comes to our favor, sometimes it does not favor. So it does not really matter. It just depends on the handling of the budget. We've also seen that even sometimes there's supplementary budget when they think that there is much more revenue. So for me, I think it's not the deficit part of the budget. It is the fiscal discipline in the budget that actually counts.
Now, you made mention of most of our revenue goes to debt servicing. Now, how much of the budget is realistically fundable at this point based on actual revenue performance? For example, from the last 3 to 5 years, from your own expertise?
Right. So from the look of things now, if you look at Nigerian contractors, I'll start from there because they are the one that execute the capital expenditure of the budget. So they're actually saying that from look of things, capital expenditure of 2025 starts around October. So if January is the beginning of the year and you are starting capital expenditure at October, that simply means you can only do 2 to 3 months before it. And that's why we have seen that it has been rolled over to 2026. And that's the danger. The danger is that it simply means that you are going to be reducing 2026 because you are adding 2025, which is not a good one. So that's the problem we are having. And they have not been releasing funds. I think that's the major thing we should look at. So for contractors, over 2,000 contractors to be complained, that simply means that government has not been releasing funds for budget MR, and it has come clear. That simply means we can only achieve 30% of the budget. And that's what I said at the beginning of the program, that Nigerians are going to suffer this. People on the street are going to suffer this. So the road that they are supposed to construct will be shifted forward. The primary healthcare they are supposed to build will be shifted forward. The education fund they are supposed to produce is going to be shifted forward. A lot of things. And we've seen also Renew Hope, is it budget or I don't know, why also call it infrastructure development something. This is out of the budget and they are doing it in different ways. So it gives a lot of us concern that why are you concentrating on those projects that are not even in the budget? Because I remember the Calabar Lagos road is actually going on, and those things are not actually in the budget, but the major thing that are in the budget are actually suffering. And that's why I'm talking about fiscal indiscipline of this administration, and I'm calling on the National Assembly to come and look at how to actually provide a better solution to this problem.
Okay, Dr. Aliyu, despite a high nominal value for capital expenditure, a large portion of the budget is consumed by recurrent spending and debt service. Now, how can the government ensure that the allocated capital funds are effectively utilized for growth-enhancing infrastructure projects, given the historical issues with corruption and capacity deficits?
Right. So for me, I think the major problem we are even having in the first place, why we recurrent expenditure combined with debt servicing will be more than the capital expenditure. It's a serious problem. That simply means that we are actually, deny people what they're supposed to have. I prefer we have a larger budget and have a larger capital expenditure, because by the time you have debt servicing simply means you're servicing your debt. It's much more of recurrent. If you combine recurrent expenditure and debt servicing, they are taking over, even not 70% of our budget, which is a problem. So until we start considering the importance of raising our capital expenditure, that's why we have a considerable development in Nigeria, because that's where we can actually get to develop. That's what the majority of Nigerians will benefit from. I think this government need to do more by raising it. At a point, I think they raised it in last one, but we raised it in last one, and now you are actually starting to implement it by October, and now you are rolling over 70% to the other way around. So it is a serious problem that we must actually look at properly.
All right, Dr. Ilias, looking at financing gaps when it comes to the budget, which of the components of the revenue are responsible for the largest underperformance? Oil revenue, non-oil revenue, tax leakages, or inefficiencies in collection agencies?
Right. So I think we need combination of them to actually get much more revenue. If you recall, at the middle of this year, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came out and said, "Yes, I have surpassed my revenue for 2025." And he said so. That simply means custom have gone beyond their average. The FIRS has also gone beyond their expectation. That means they have crossed the targeted sum they are expected to get. But by and large, we also see President Bola Ahmed Tinubu also came out and said, "I will not borrow domestic. I will not do domestic borrowing again." Well, again, we have seen him also go back to borrow domestic to finance domestic finance, to actually finance the budget. We have also seen him go out to borrow internationally. So it's not the doing how they actually perform. It depends on the government. So for me, if you ask me, I think our tax revenue has actually go beyond average. The custom, we will see some of us even complain that these fiscal tools that we are using and not in a good manner. Example is if you go to import or export now, you see how, look, I think export is even better now, but to import, you see how expensive it is just to still generate money. Then the oil revenue is actually doing well. But if you look at the last analysis, you see that the non-oil sector is actually bringing more money to the coffers of the federal government, which is it's a good one. That's why we always say that if you have good GDP, it is going to help us to actually get non-oil sector income revenue, and that will help Nigeria. So we must target mining, and other sector. If you look at the GDP, it's even looking at, real estate, looking at mining and other sector, which is a good one. So we must do more to actually diversify to an extent from oil revenue.
Okay, Doctor, let's talk about revenue and expenditure challenges. How has government revenue compared to projections in recent years? And which sectors are underperforming right now?
Right. So if you talk about revenue, let me take you to GDP components. We have what we call service sector, we have industrial sector, we have agricultural sector. So ordinarily, for a Nigerian that is agrarian, that we know that agriculture is our main focus, and we have more people employed in that area. We should have agriculture lead in terms of revenue for federal government. In terms of GDP, we should have agriculture taking the lead. Then after agriculture, we should have industrial sector. This has to do with manufacturing sector. But the other opposite is the case. In Nigeria today, we have service sector taking the lead. And like we always say, service sector is a sector that is not actually real in nature. How do I mean? It's portfolio investment. So I can put my money in stock, and tomorrow I can equally remove the money, just like what happened recently in the stock market. So also, service sector cannot give us the expected employment that we're actually looking at. Remember, it is in the manufacturing sector, in the agricultural sector, that you can actually employ people, who get be gainfully employed. So service sector does not really employ. So if you look at it very well, the service sector is giving us more revenue, to answer your question directly, more GDP in that sector. But I think we need to do more to actually activate other sectors, agriculture and industrial sector. Then if you look at it generally in terms of revenue now, I think our main source of revenue still remain our oil.
Okay, on the spending side, why do critical sectors receive less than allocated while others exceed their budgets?
Well, it's because governments sometimes have not seen the reason to invest more in those sectors. And investing in those sectors simply means a lot to Nigerians, especially because, like I said, if you look at our MSME, it's over 60% of Nigerians are in that sector. And over 60% of income is also coming from that. I'm sorry, over 60% employment is also coming in that sector. That simply means government should look into that direction, empower people, provide the fund that people can actually borrow to actually invest in their businesses. I think this is where government need to look at, even beyond giving what we call how this empowerment government is actually giving people money directly. We believe that government should use that money to actually invest in the real sector so that people can actually get to work, people can actually get to earn legitimate income compared to giving them what we call a 25,000 naira stipends. After 3 months, it will nothing again to get from that sector.
Right now, Dr. Ilias, so earlier you made mention of the amount of debt Nigeria is incurring and making a point that the president has said that Nigeria has fulfilled its revenue quota so far, but still borrowing at the moment. Now, how sustainable is Nigeria's current debt path, considering the debt servicing already consumes a major share of revenue? And then it begs to ask you this question: are we borrowing to invest or borrowing to survive? Or what percentage of borrowed funds goes to recurrent versus capital expenditure?
Well, naturally, like I said earlier, borrowing is not bad because we have seen top economies, America, Japan, China, they are the highest borrowers. But if you look at what they actually use the money to do, it makes a lot of sense and makes a lot of investment, and that still give them the opportunity to continue to lead. So in Nigeria today, the question is, what do we borrow for? A good example is when we borrow during President Muhammad Buhari, we've seen that we borrow for railway, and we've seen the rail working, Abuja, Kaduna, Itakwe, Warri. We've seen it actually working. These are the things that we should be borrowing for. A capital expenditure that will, in the long run, translate into economic development and give people considerable employment. Every country borrow for development, but the oversight function of this, the decision of this, let's say, lies with the National Assembly. So we've not seen this assembly saying no to Mr. President that no, you cannot borrow for that. I think that happens lastly during the Bukola Saraki era, Senator Bukola Saraki era. We've not seen this government. So until this Senate or National Assembly rather decide to be able to scrutinize that no, we cannot borrow for this, we can borrow this is what we need to borrow for. It's what we should look at that. But that the president actually made mention, maybe the hand of the president needs to do more, because the president came out by himself and defied he will not borrow domestic, he will not borrow from domestic market again. But we've seen him again and again coming back to actually borrow. They must start telling us why they are borrowing and what they are borrowing. And we must begin to see what they actually are borrowing for. But me and you cannot just question Mr. President like that, except we have opportunity of analyzing it on this media platform. However, the National Assembly have the responsibility to look, because even remember that all these borrowing are being implemented by one agency, one MDAs or the other, and all these MDAs are being oversight. They are the national.
All right, I believe we're having a little technical difficulty when it comes to the connectivity with our guests.
National Assembly is having oversight on them.
Right.
So they must,
Ilias,
must also be careful with the Bretton Woods institution, because if you look at Bretton Woods institution, that is the IMF and the World Bank, the way at which they want to borrow you money, you must also be you must also have your caution, because remember, when they are borrowing you money, they're also giving you conditionalities. Among it is that remove fuel subsidy, among it is remove subsidy from electricity. They will come with a lot of conditionalities. So we must look at the one we are borrowing, the one that have a lot of a moratorium, the one that will benefit citizens of Nigeria. But we must not borrow for consumption. We must borrow for capital expenditure.
All right, Dr. Ilias, talking about borrowing, what practical measures now can the government take to close these financing gaps without creating unsustainable debt?
But the only way is for us to, you recall that when the first subsidy was removed, most of us think, yes, this would have tamed the level of our borrowing, but we've not seen it happen. So the best thing is for us to say, okay, in 2026, we will limit our borrowing to a particular level and we stay by it. There is nothing in borrowing. You must only cut your quotes, like the local balance, according to what you can manage. So at this point in time, it's for us to see, okay, since we are rolling over most of 2025 budget into 2026, let's reduce our borrowing. The only thing is to have that fiscal discipline and to borrow less.
Right now, Dr. Iliasu, looking at budget implementation, I believe that is one of the hard parts of having a budget. Now, implementation rates for capital projects remain low in Nigeria. What systemic obstacles repeatedly hinder capital budget execution in your own expertise, and how can they make sure that they close that gap of implementation and become efficient when it comes to implementing that budget?
Right. You remember that. Well, the fact is that you recall that immediately you get into a new year, recurrent expenditure starts. If our government will go to way and means to get money to start recurrent expenditure. So our government are not conscious of capital expenditure the way they are conscious of the recurrent expenditure. Imagine this 2025 capital expenditure disbursement is starting by October, when we have about 2-3 months. So I think the effort they use in implementing the recurrent expenditure that concern all of them, they should also use that to also release fund for capital expenditure. Recall, capital expenditure is what actually helps the totality of Nigerians. So I think they should use that effort of pursuing the recurrent expenditure to the level of going to ways and means to actually borrow money from CBN to actually implement the recurrent expenditure. They should use that effort also to be fighting for, capital expenditure. So the major thing is that release of fund. Let them release on fund. At least if the releasing of funds start from the first quarter of every year, that simply means we are ready to remember, because by the time you go to second quarter, third quarter, some projects will have even get to the level of completion.
Okay, looking ahead, what would a well-executed budget look like for Nigeria in the next few years?
Right, it's an open book for everyone to see. So once you put the money in the right place, every Nigeria will be able to see it. We'll begin to see improve in our road infrastructure. We'll begin to see the a good appearance of all the sectors, especially education, health sector, and those ones that really need the attention. So once you spend money in the right way, especially the capital project is what we can easily see. Capital project simply means implementation of projects. So once you implement the project, it's open to everyone. It's like an open where everybody will see. So there's no need to say you measure. You will see it and you'll be able to actually measure. And you must also start following the money. I recall during the time of the President Jonathan also, once they release money, it will be in the newspaper and they will tell us which one goes to each local government, which project goes. By so doing, you can also have it hard copy, then you go check if we actually implement. So if you implement a project, if capital expenditure is well implemented, it should be there for everyone to see. Example, look at the federal capital. Even once you go out compared to the last administration, you see that the road infrastructure has actually changed. So that's how projects are actually being, that's how capital projects can be measured. it cannot be measured by on paper. It's by us seeing what the money is being expended upon.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Aliyu Ilias, for helping us unpack these issues and understand the implications for government policy, economic growth, and this topic entirely. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.